Local officials are stepping up the campaign to get new revenue in Boston for housing, preservation, and open space. The revenue would come from a 1% surcharge on the local property tax. The measure would go before voters in November if there is approval from the mayor and city council. Joining us is one of the supporters with the campaign, Yes for a Better Boston. He's also the president of the Mass Association of Community Development Corporations. We'd like to welcome Joe Kriesberg. Thank you very much for being with us, Joe.
Thank you for having me.
This is a measure that Boston voters said no to some years back, but talk about the time now and I guess why you must feel this is really needed.
Well, the voters did reject the Community Preservation Act in 2001, but a lot has changed since then. Not the least of which, the very statute that we're asking voters to enact. 15 years ago, we were proposing a 2% surcharge. This time, it's only a 1% surcharge. There's also been changes that increase the matching funds that will be available to the City of Boston from the state, and more flexible rules about how the money can be spent, so we can now spend it improving our parks and ball fields for the young people in our city. So we also have a much stronger economy now. In 2001, the vote took place right after 9/11. The economy was at risk. Everybody was extremely nervous about where things were headed. And this year, we see a booming real estate and a tremendous desire by people in Boston and across the country to ensure that our economy benefits everyone. And this is a progressive proposal that's going to improve the quality of life for everyone in the city and make sure that we all get to benefit from the growth we're seeing.
Talk about the money that's available for these categories, and I guess the main concern here is about housing. I mean, the city has, maybe you can't say they have less money than they used to, but at the same time, other sources of money for housing, that's a big problem probably.
Well, everybody knows that Boston has a serious housing challenge. Rents and home values are going up. It's very difficult to buy a home in the city of Boston, and it's very difficult to find an apartment that you can afford to rent. So we need to do much more than ever before, and at the same time, the federal government is cutting back. The state funding has been pretty flat, small increases, but not keeping up with the increase in costs. So the city has to do more. And this is a great opportunity for the city to do more, to get more state money at the same time, because by adopting this proposal, we automatically qualify for $4 or $5 million, maybe more, in state matching funds. And this program is particularly useful because it's extremely flexible. There's no federal rules, there's no state bureaucracy. It's up to the City of Boston and the people of the City of Boston how to deploy the money.
Another change from the old days is the cost of land. I remember CDCs could grab all this cheap land and build lots of affordable housing, and nowadays you can't do much of that.
No, absolutely not. A lot of the affordable housing we have in the City of Boston today was built at a time when the land was free or cheap, and building was a lot cheaper. We're fighting now to preserve that housing, to make sure it doesn't become market rate housing, to keep it affordable and to keep it in good physical condition. And building new affordable housing is more expensive than ever. Now we're finding ways to do it, trying to save money where we can, but the bottom line is we need to invest. And the thing about housing that people need to remember is when you invest in housing, you're investing in education because children will do better in school. When you invest in housing, you're investing in health because people with good quality housing live healthier lives and spend less time in the hospital. So when you're investing in housing, you're getting a tremendous bang for your buck.
Now, voters, when they see historic preservation, they're going to think of tourists on the Freedom Trail, but there's a lot of preservation important to the neighborhoods, too.
Oh, absolutely. The historic preservation money certainly can help preserve some of the history of our city that draws tourists here and helps our economy, and that's a good thing, but it can help in particular with neighborhood historic assets, historic buildings and museums and monuments, things that make our neighborhood special. So it can also help renovate some of our older school buildings. It can help convert old mill buildings into housing. So there's a lot of uses for it in the neighborhoods, and it's part of what allows us to ensure that as Boston grows, we retain our history and our unique character.
One of the more interesting examples was the renovation of that mansion in Roxbury that was a big white elephant, and not only is the history preserved, but there's also some new housing there. And this is what Historic Boston worked on, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And there'll be a lot of projects that we envision where at least that'll involve both housing and historic preservation, or maybe housing and some green space development, or all three in some cases. There's certainly happened in other cities and towns around the state. And it's important to know 160 cities and towns across Massachusetts have already adopted this, proven that it works. None have repealed it. All have found it to be a great tool. So it's time for Boston to catch up with the rest of the state.
And in open space, I'm sure you've got some advocates in the coalition here saying we need more money for these things.
Well, absolutely. We have a long list of capital needs in our parks. We have ball fields that are falling apart. We have playgrounds that need to be upgraded, made safer. We also, open space and green space is a big part of our strategy for climate resilience. As seawater rises happen, one of the ways you deal with that along the waterfront is with open space and green space for drainage. So this is really critical, and we're likely to add 100,000 people to the city of Boston over the next 20 years. They're going to need a place to play, a place to sit and read a book on a park bench. We need to make sure that we have an increase in our park space to accommodate the increase in our population.
And of course, this is something that enhances property values, even if it's not on something that you own yourself. If the park is down the street, or if the historic building is falling apart, you need someone who can fix it. So,
yeah, I mean, this is really a quality of life issue and a quality of life campaign. This is going to make Boston a better place for all of us to live, and help ensure that we can live here, that we don't get displaced, that people with limited incomes don't have to move out of the city they love. So it's a win-win.
Now, I know there are some people doing well enough that they can pay the surcharge, not feel much pain. There are people who don't own property. But what about the people who do own property? Maybe they've owned it for a long time, they're on a fixed income now, and they're really worried about their tax burden.
Well, I think everybody's worried about their tax burden, and it's important first to know that the vast majority of Boston voters will pay nothing. 2/3 of Boston residents are tenants and won't have to pay the tax, and homeowners who make less than $78,000 a year, by and large, will be able to be completely exempt. The statute allows that people, families, and in particular seniors that are below that threshold don't have to pay. And it's important to remember, even if your house is worth $500,000, even if it's assessed at $500,000, your monthly cost is going to be around $2. So it's a very modest cost for people that are with homes in the $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 range. Now, if you own a $20 million condo and the 37th floor of the Millennium Tower, well, yeah, your taxes, it's going to be a few $100s, but I'm not too worried about those taxpayers.
We should mention, if people want to keep up with the campaign, you've got at least a social media presence they can check out?
Yes, I mean, Google Yes for a Better Boston. We have a Facebook page. We're going to have a website up in a couple of days. The campaign is in its very early stage. We just created the campaign committee, just opened a bank account. We're building the membership of the coalition. We have housing groups and parks advocates. We have youth recreation groups, and the coalition is going to expand further. We have a few labor organizations, some business leaders have joined on. It's going to be a great and broad coalition, but we don't have our website up yet, but we are on Facebook, and we'll have it up in a couple of days. So we're really excited about it, and certainly the campaign got a huge boost this week with Mayor Walsh's endorsement. That's going to make a big difference, we think, in our ability to win in November.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
From Yes for a Better Boston, Joe Kriesberg. Still to come, a new kind of fundraiser planned by Healthcare for All.